Hi, this is my review of Maid The Roleplaying Game. Well, first of all, let me give you a quick introduction of what the Maid anime or manga subgenre is all about, because maybe some of you are not familiar with this type of subgenre. Well, Maid anime or manga has to do with an exaggerated representation of the concept of the Western maid. This is not exactly an accurate or a precise simulation of what a maid's life and duties are all about. Rather, it's like an exaggerated, a crazy fantasy version of what a maid is supposed to do and how she's supposed to serve her master. Maids in anime and manga are usually portrayed as with all sorts of crazy backgrounds. They maybe cyborgs or maybe ninja maids, or I don't know. There could be so many things, aliens, fairies, and they usually serve or maybe even idolize or worship a master, the master of the household. And sometimes they even have a sort of like a flirty relationship with the master that could be pretty light or maybe even really hardcore according to the type of anime or manga. And there are all sorts of crazy love triangles, and they have these wacky adventures where it's not just cleaning the house or serving the master. They usually have to fight against some monster, or they end up in some insane gonzo setting where dimensions cross, or they get attacked by mercenaries or mobsters. There are so many things, so many ways in which anime or manga related to maid as a theme can develop. Well, let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The PDF is pretty good. It has so many good and thematic illustrations. They all just scream out anime and manga, and they have all the staples, stereotypes, and archetypes as seen in different maid anime and manga. And the book is well organized as well. It's pretty easy to learn how to play the game. This is a very simple rule system, but at the same time, if you're not careful, you may end up missing some details. So even though this is a very simple game to play, I recommend that you read every part carefully, or you may miss out on some details that are essential so that you can represent this type of subgenre of anime and manga. The PDF even has an excellent table of contents, and everything is just pretty well laid out. And the cool thing is that there's also free downloadable content. You can download extra scenarios and version of the rules that it's kind of like the non version of Maid, non like as in related to the church, but because those materials couldn't make it in the final product due to political correctness, or maybe they just ran out of space, but they are free to download at the website. And so, well, let's talk about the book itself and the way it tells you how to play the game. Something that I really like about this PDF is that it has all sorts of notes from the designer of the game and the translator telling you about the maid subgenre and how to introduce your players to it, and all sorts of important details on how to play the game, being really loyal or true to the theme, and all the plot lines and elements that make it go beyond a simple role-playing game. They want you to play a game that feels as if you're a part of an anime or manga. And well, character creation in this game, it feels really old school, because there are a lot of tables, and that's pretty fun. You'll never end up with the same maid in consecutive sessions. You're going to be creating all sorts of different maids with crazy results. So for example, you're going to be rolling to get special qualities for your maid. Maybe your maid is actually a guy in disguise, or maybe your maid has elf ears, or maybe she's an angel or a devil or a princess or a vampire, or maybe a hired assassin. There are so many results and you may end up with some pretty wacky combinations, pretty original characters. You also have different attributes that you will use in different tests in the game, like athletics, affection, skill, cunning, luck, will, and they are all pretty much self-explanatory. And also you will be rolling to determine the maid roots. That is, if your maid, maybe your maid is an orphan, or maybe your maid had an unrequited love, or maybe she's a slave, or she wants revenge, to get revenge on someone. And there's also a pretty cool feature called stress explosion. And stress explosion is something that results when your maid takes too much stress during the game. And this stress explosion is kind of like just freaking out, or losing control, and you start acting just crazy. Your maid will start acting in a pattern of craziness. Maybe she's an alcoholic, and she'll start drinking alcohol non-stop, or maybe she'll start running away all the time. Maybe she will start gambling, or maybe she will become really violent, and this is going to hinder her efforts when she's trying to serve the master, accomplish different tasks. Because, for example, maybe the master asks your maid to clean up the pantry, or the fridge, and if she has a stress explosion related to eating or drinking, she's going to end up eating and drinking the entire contents of the fridge or the pantry. And all these tables are pretty customizable. You can there are so many results that apply to so many things. They are pretty flexible, but it's very easy to modify some of the results, so you can customize the tables according to your campaign or game. And then you also have a maid weapon table. Now, weapons here are going to be more like an aesthetic touch or detail. They don't have different bonuses. There are certain cases where they could give you some bonuses. It all depends on the type of game you are playing, but there are more like colorful details. Maybe your maid uses a kitchen knife to fight, or maybe a bazooka, or a ray gun, or a hammer, or maybe a chainsaw. So you can create all sorts of crazy weapon combinations. And you also get a special maid power. Maybe your maid can turn into a sort of iron wall, like an iron body. Or maybe she's really fast and can evade all sorts of blows, or maybe just avoid accidents like tripping on something. Or maybe she has a giant weapon, like the ones seen in many video games and anime. And, well, adding all of this together, adding all these attributes, powers, weapons, backgrounds, your character becomes much more than just a playing piece, in the sense that the way she will start gaining favor from her master is directly related to these attributes and powers, and you have to take them into consideration all the time. So, for example, if your maid is a cyborg, you know that she's not that is really like cold and not really too affectionate. You know that you're going to have to win your master's love and affection by acting in a very practical way. And you're going to be probably excelling at combat because you're a cyborg, and maybe you have weapons all over your body. But maybe your maid is a cute lolly maid, perhaps a cute fairy lolly maid, and you have to take some other approach to win your master's favor, because maybe if you're really short and weak, you won't be able to help too much carrying heavy stuff around the house, or maybe you'll get really tired after cleaning stuff, and you'll have to do some other kinds of favors for your master. Or maybe she cooks really well. But of course, this all gets really interesting when all sorts of crazy things start happening around the house. Maybe your house is invaded by a ghost or a demon, or maybe the master is having a very unusual guest, maybe a visitor from outer space. And you have to start adapting to the way things will develop, so your maid becomes the favorite of the master. And that's an important thing of this game. You can play it as a cooperative experience or as a competitive experience. Cooperative, well, that's pretty self-explanatory as well, especially for veteran RPG role players, because basically everybody just trying to fulfill an objective. Maybe they entered a contest in which the most original and and fun mansion will win, and the master is ordering the maids around so that they start decorating the house and adding new rooms and all sorts of entertainment for when guests visit and stuff like that. But it could also be like a competition between the maids to win the master's favor. Maybe the master is looking for a specific object, or maybe the master wants to organize a party, and the maids are going to be fighting among themselves. Maybe not physically, although they could end up fighting physically. They could just be really sly and witty and backstab each other by trying to mess up the other mates' duties or accomplishments, and they start making sure that the master notices only her duties and the way they have behaved and how they work pretty well, cleaning this room or getting rid of that extra dimensional monster, etc. Action resolution is actually, it's pretty simple. You just need in this game you just need a couple of six-sided dice, and you roll them, and they are modified by your attributes and sometimes by your powers, and you have to surpass a certain difficulty. Usually you have to roll higher than set difficulty, and when you test your skills against some other character, maybe an NPC or maybe another made player, you have to roll higher, and the loser takes stress. And the only way to reduce stress is by, as I was telling you about, the stress explosion. And the stress explosion, basically what you have to do is role play that stress explosion. For example, maybe when your maid gets a stress explosion, she's going to get all paranoid, and you have to act really paranoid until a number of minutes pass, and that's the number of stress points you need to recover or rather reduce. And when they are all over, you go back to your normal self. But of course, during the stress explosion, because you're suffering some sort of weird effect like paranoia or gluttony or whatever, your tasks are going to have penalties, or you're not going to perform as well as a normal maid would have. And another cool thing, and very thematic too, is the maid uniform table. Well, the maids draw power from their maid uniforms, and because all sorts of crazy and maybe even perverted events, your maid may end up losing her apron, her blouse, her underwear, her skirt, her headdress, and she will start losing power and getting penalties because she lost her clothes. And this is like a staple and something that always happens in maid anime and manga. Because this is sometimes very naughty subgenre. It's common to see the different maids and heroines losing her clothes and having all sorts of wacky situations and perverted comedies. And as I was telling you about, you can handle it as light or as hardcore as you want. It's usually easier and better for a general audience to play very light comedy, like, for example, maybe the maid loses her skirt, and the master is going to be like, "Oh, I want to look at you skirtless," but suddenly something happens to the master, and he gets kind of like punished for his perverted actions. And now the master is usually the game master or referee, but another player can also play as a master with a different with optional rules that I will explain in a few minutes. But the master doesn't necessarily need to be male; she could also be female, because in these types of anime and manga, there is a lot of anything goes. Sometimes there's romance between girls and boys, and genre really doesn't matter. Sometimes age doesn't even matter. So you have to have really clear the different levels of likeness or hardcore you're going to be employing with this game, because it could get a bit out of hand. And well, now about the favor, I was telling you about how you need to win favor from the master. Well, favor is kind of like, you could consider them experience points, and you get rewarded for accomplishing different tasks. Maybe your master, oh, I wish I could go to the moon and get some weird alien treasure from there. And if your maid succeeds in, I don't know, building him a spaceship and going to the moon and getting that object, that your master is going to reward you with favor. But he may also punish you by taking favor away. For example, maybe if it's a competitive game and the master notices that you are cheating or causing trouble for the other mates, he's going to remove favor points from you. So you better act very stealthily if you want to hinder the other mate's progress. And favor will allow you to use different bonuses, but it will also give you new abilities sometimes. It all depends on the optional rules you're using, and there are so many optional rules included in this game. And sometimes I think there's also fan produced rules, and as I was telling you about the downloadable content. And if you lose too much favor with your master, that is, if you don't accomplish your duties and you start failing your master a lot and accumulating stress, you are going to suffer some attribute losses, because otherwise you're going to be kicked out of the household. And now when it comes to the NPCs, you have a lot of useful samples that could be used with all sorts of games and themes related to Maid. And you also get different guidelines for their attributes and how much damage they may take, because spirit is the way characters suffer damage. You have spirits like hit points, and you get all sorts of guidelines to challenge your players accordingly without overwhelming them, unless you want to overwhelm them, of course. And now the mansion is a very important part of the game, the mansion and the master. The mansion is a place you're going to carry out the adventure, and you have a few sample maps of how a mansion should be built and how you can play inside one. And of course the master is like the central figure of the mansion, and he's going to have absolute authority over the mates. But the master is usually a wimp. He or she is usually very useless, and the only thing she has is absolute command over the mates. But the master is usually going to get kidnapped or need help to do almost everything, and this is where the mates may end up winning or losing favor with the master. And so thanks to that, the book comes with a lot of tables to generate all sorts of random events. There's actually a way in the rules in which your maid, by spending favor, can call upon a random event, and this may give an interesting twist to the entire plotline, maybe in your maid's favor. So you have contemporary events, such as a famous thief leaves his calling card, or there's an earthquake, or there's a fire. You have fantasy events, maybe the Mage King is reborn, or an assassin targets the master, a mobile fortress is drawing near. Or you also have space events, maybe a space wizard's tower appear, a bounty hunter trespasses, a galactic empire's battleship arrives at your mansion on a secret mission. So you're going to be able to play any sort of game that you want. It doesn't matter if you want to play a fantasy game, a science fiction game, a science fantasy game. You're going to have all sorts of tables to build the exact game that you want, and there are so many tables for that. There's a lot of good content here. There's also a lot of information regarding to play styles, if you want to play just completely random scenarios, or if you want to build your own, or the favor race that I was telling you about, which is very competitive. And there's also more tips on how to build everything around this, and more tables, of course. So maybe you want to play as a really serious and gritty game. Maybe it's a household trying to survive World War I, or maybe it's a mystery, a murder mystery, and the master is trying to solve who killed who with what, kind of like Clue. Or maybe you can play almost anything. Maybe if you want to play as like cavemen mates, you can try that. Another good thing is that this book comes with a lot of examples on how to play the game, a lot of sample sessions, and different scenarios that you can use to start playing right away. And you also have optional rules. More specifically, there are a lot of optional character types. And so, for example, maybe you want to play as a head maid, and the head maid, well, she's like the chief of all maids, and she's going to be able to order other maids around and get benefits from the other mates' successful action, but she may also get affected by the other mates' failures, and sometimes someone may lose the benefit of being a head maid, and another maid will become the head maid. And so this is a very interesting position both for cooperative and competitive gameplay. And you can also play as a butler, and butler are usually stronger, and they seem at first with more advantages than a maid. The butler also has different powers and abilities. Oh, and I forgot to mention that when you build any character here, you also determine all sorts of crazy eye colors and hairstyles and hair colors and dress colors, because you know how anime you're always ending up with so many crazy attires and hairdos and all that. But going back to the butler usually has to remain calm at all times, so he cannot have stress explosions. The worst enemy of a butler is stress. There's no way he's going to be able to burn it off with a stress explosion. So he has to be really careful, or he's going to get kicked out of the house more easily. And there are some other restrictions when it comes to butlers, so it actually balances things out, so the butlers are not too powerful over the mates. And there are also rules, as I was telling you about, how to create a master, and the master's advantages and disadvantages, which I was telling you about, that the master is usually useless, and his only saving grace is that he has complete command over the mates. But he also has a lot of tables, so you can build a different master with each session. There's also a lot of tables to create a specific mansion in what kind of world. Maybe it's a cyber world, a post-apocalyptic world, maybe it's in the Old West, or maybe, and you can also set the mood of the campaign. Maybe it's a romance campaign, or an action campaign, a horror campaign. You can also roll for the mansion's appearance and all the facilities that are surrounding the mansion. Maybe the mansion is next to a beach, or maybe the mansion has an outdoor pool and an indoor pool, a tennis court, or maybe there's some sort of like a magical barrier around the mansion, or maybe it has a very sci-fi high-tech medical room. There are so many things. Other optional rules include romance and seduction, which is kind of like a competition to seduce someone. If you manage to seduce someone, you're going to have a lot of advantages over that character, and it's going to become a free-for-all. Everybody's trying to seduce the other, especially the master, and it gets pretty wacky sometimes. There are a lot of details to carry out different romantic activities, and how simple things like a word of love from the person that you like, or kissing with that person, or seducing, is going to reduce your stress. But maybe you're betrayed by that NPC or PC, of course, or maybe you get into a fight, or your love interest tries to seduce someone else. You're going to get stress penalties. And as I was telling you about, stress is really bad. It's going to result in many negative things when you have a stress explosion, or maybe even you're going to end up be kicked out of the house. And there's also more tips and tables on how to handle tragedy. If you want your game to be a bit darker or grittier, you can generate tragedies like, oh, that NPC or PC attempted to kill herself or himself, or maybe he's getting harassed, or it's got involved in a scandal. And there's also rules for comforting those players after they are suffering maybe some sort of personal tragedy or trauma. And trauma charts related to many different misfortunes. Maybe your character was a former delinquent, or she had a miscarriage, or she was kidnapped, targeted by a stalker, etc., etc., etc. You also have some complexes, and those are the complexes, the one I was telling you about. Sorry, costumes. And the different costumes may end up giving you some benefits related to your maid power. So maybe you have bandages and that's going to help you when you perform athletics activities and such. or and maybe you have a school swimsuit, and that's going to be really alluring because there are so many like characters with that fetish of school swimsuits, and maybe you're the master of the house has that fetish, and you're going to use it to your advantage and to gain a lot of favor. And there's just a huge list of costumes for your maid. Wow. And a huge list of items, all sorts of general items, maybe pets, facilities, tools, flying guillotine, mecha suit, card dueling, king of war. That's kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh. There's a lot of items that you can use, and they all have a thematic and a rules mechanic or special rule that will allow your mate to gain more favor with the master, or try to become better or more successful at being a maid than the other maids. And wow, just so many tables to generate events, romance events. Maybe the master feels lonely, the mates can make an opposed roll through whatever means they wish. The winner gets 10 minutes alone with the master. Or maybe you have light-hearted events. A stray cat wanders into the mansion, or the ingredients for the next meal were rotten, and you also get action events. A cockroach, there's a cockroach, you have to kill it, or maybe the master sees one of the maids changing her clothes, she's going to get more favor. And there's also hard life events. Maybe the maid with the lowest skill falls down. If the master notices, he'll take care of her, and that gives her favor. The maid with the lowest will goes to the bathroom or her own room and cries by herself. If she loses 5 minutes, she has to be crying 5 minutes, and she's going to end up losing a lot of opportunities to please the master. You also get dark events. A black cat wanders into the mansion, and its meow resounds through the mansion, and everybody gets cursed. Or maybe bad news arrived from a relative. The master takes 15 stress. This affects obviously a player that is playing as a master. There's also horror events. A notebook detailing someone's grudges is discovered. The owner loses favor, and everybody else takes stress. Or maybe there's a sudden downpour accompanied by lightning. Despite being inside, the master takes stress. And there's also a poltergeist event. So many events. And fantasy events, of course. The master joins a strange cult. At this rate, he might just use the maids for ritual sacrifices. Or maybe the master loses his memory. He can't remember his own mates. Or maybe the spirit of one of the master's ancestors appears. Those who coldly reject him suffer a curse and lose favor. An early modern event, the boiler explodes, it starts a fire, or the master is harassed by relatives who are jealous of his position. And contemporary events, the master suddenly runs away from home. There's a sudden storm, there's a band of robbers fleeing the law, they take refuge in the mansion. And space events, a space bill collector appears. Encounters with a spaceship full of other mates. You are out of food. How will you search for food now? You discover a mysterious machine in the heart of the mansion. And as you can see, wow, I thought that I was done with the tables. They just keep appearing. Cyber events. An S-rank sniper attacks the master mates. How will you fight him? Or someone reveals to the public that the master is actually a political fixer for a massive criminal organization. What will the mates do? And all these tables, and I'm going to stop reading them because they just keep popping up, and they all just color the entire adventure. They integrate immediately with the rules. Every element that appears thanks to the tables is an opportunity for your mate to gain favor by serving the master and by frustrating the other mates' plans and tasks. And the events just keep coming. There are also weather events and events by the type of world you are playing the game on. You also get more sample scenarios. Wow, a lot of extra scenarios. Sample character, sample mates, sample butler, sample master. And there's also some afterward, like a designer interview giving you additional tips on what this game is all about and its potential. And there's a lot of character sheets at the end, of course, for butler characters, for maids, and if you're using the romance rules, you also get a special sheet for that. And wow, and I've already played this game a lot of times, and I thought I had scratched I had played with a lot of the, but I haven't even scratched the surface. There are so many things. And well, let me tell you what I think about this game. I think it has a lot of potential, overwhelmingly so. I can't find any specific negative points. You can play the exact game that you want with the rules that you want. If you want to play a very simple and generic game, you can play with a few beginning chapters. But if you want to complicate things a bit more and more, or add a bit more depth to the entire thing, you'll be adding all the optional rules for butlers, for headmaids, for master players, and use all of those random event tables. I think this book is pretty good, even if you don't want to play the Maid RPG. If you like to play comedy RPGs, or maybe serious and gritty RPGs, there are tables for almost everything, to generate places and events and characters. You just have to take the tables that you want to use. So this game is all about customization, and it feels very simple at the same time, despite having so many things. This game is going to last you a lifetime, honestly. Now, well, there are some things I could point out as negative, but it's most like an obstacles that you have to surpass to play this game. Well, it's going to be a bit hard to find people to play this game, because, well, you need somebody who enjoys pen and paper or tabletop role-playing games, but you also need somebody who wants to play an anime RPG or a manga RPG, and you're also going to need somebody who is comfortable playing a Maid role-playing game, because for example, the designer tells you that this game is made so that male players play as female maids, and some male players aren't going to be comfortable with that concept. I haven't had an obstacle finding players for that, and some players weren't even familiar with anime or Maid anime, and there's always it's turned out pretty well for me. We've had so many funny and interesting sessions, but I could see how that could be an obstacle for certain players, that they have only guys and not many. You could also play this game with women, but maybe you have only guys as friends, and you won't be able to convince them to play this game. And you also have to watch out for the tone of the game, because as you may have noticed, this game has a lot of perverted potential, and it may end up being too, I don't know, too pornographic. Could it be? Yeah. So you have to decide if you want to play a very light game. But, well, then again, if you have a girlfriend or a wife who likes to role play in certain situations, this is a great role playing game for a specific hour and place. So overall, I highly recommend this game. As I was telling you about, I can't find any negative things about it. If you are not familiar with anime or the Maid subgenre, you should give it a try. Maybe you'll end up liking it. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.